Renee, how are you?
I'm doing well, Janice. I'm excited about being finally together with you on Facebook Live.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. So I'm Janice Marks from PhD Math. I'm the creator of PhD Math, and I have today with me Rene Islas, and we've been talking about some different topics about parenting and education. And one thing that I've noticed and we've talked about is that often, and this happened to me actually, I'm familiar with it firsthand, but one thing that I've noticed is that parents often think that their children are at a different level than they really are. And this happens a lot with math. I think it probably happens a little bit less with reading, because parents read with their parents so much, but I know with math, often I'll be coaching parents or working with children, and the parents initially think that their kids are quite ahead of where they actually are. And you were mentioning that you had seen this as well.
Yeah, so just a little bit about my background. I used to be the chief of staff in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Ed at the United States Department of Education, and have dedicated my profession and career to really improving the performance of students in schools today. And one of those things that we see pretty often is actually a byproduct of the standards movement. So you hear a lot about, in the public, Common Core math and standards in general, state standards, and then the testing that comes along with it. And really what we find out is that schools are driving children to reach certain levels and certain expectations and exposing them to the content very early. And sometimes they are pressured into doing that before the children are ready and have the foundational skills. So I'm interested in how you kind of found that out with your daughter and then even as a teacher yourself.
Sure. So, well, it really started out with my daughter. So she was in second grade, and it was my understanding that second grade they were starting to learn multiplication. She had an assessment at the beginning of the year that I didn't actually even know that she took. So I wasn't aware of the results. And what I did find out was halfway through the year that she was in the lowest math group, and something that she was upset about. And I really wasn't even aware that there were these different levels. So when I just took a closer look and spoke with the teacher, I saw that she had taken an assessment and she had received like a 30 out of 150 on a math assessment, which is very low. So when I took a look at the assessment, which actually doesn't usually happen, parents don't usually see these assessments, but when I took a look at the assessment, I saw that she still didn't know how to add well at all. So that was pretty eye-opening. So I started working with her on addition and the subtraction and then multiplication over the next six months, and caught her up. But then when I started working with kids, with other families' children, I saw that the same thing was happening. This exact same thing was happening over and over again. And these kids were actually much older, in third, fourth, and fifth grade. So what had happened was the kids had to keep up with the class and the expectations, of that grade, but they had never developed, like you're saying, they'd never developed a solid foundation of the basics and things that came before that. And what I saw though was that I really felt like the teachers didn't have a very good way of testing for this and also relaying the information to the parent, because testing for math fact fluency is not really that easy. And you need a lot of time with each child in order to know like exactly where they are. So when I do that one-on-one, and it takes quite a bit of time. So the person that really has the time for that is the parent, because they have the child at home in the evenings and on the weekends. So that's really when something like that can take place and be done really, really well. So yes, I think that's an issue when I was teaching, it was an issue for over half the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about how that works out. And so parents, when they're coming to Page a Day Math and thinking about making a specific purchase of a product, they often align it to what they're studying in school.
Yeah.
So if I'm in second grade, third grade, the teachers are telling me that my student is working in multiplication, but really the challenge might be that they need a little extra help or speed. They might understand the concept of addition and subtraction, but sometimes that fluency rate is really what's important, right?
Definitely. I mean, I can tell you that when a parent tells me that their child is having trouble with multiplication, I'd say 95% of the time, the real issue is that they don't know addition well enough. So, and that creates a little bit of a problem because the parent is thinking that they need multiplication. The teacher might be saying they need multiplication, but really it's very hard to learn multiplication if you can't add and subtract well first. And then you're really just memorizing these random numbers rather than learning and memorizing something that can make sense. But I've learned how to kind of bridge that by learning how to like catch kids up with addition and subtraction and still keep them and still have them move forward at the level that they're supposed to be moving at. So you kind of help the child with their self-esteem and their confidence so they don't feel like they're going backwards. So the parent doesn't feel like their child is going backwards, and so that they can kind of learn a little bit of everything at the same time. It takes a certain amount of focus, a little bit of extra effort at home from the parent, but it's definitely doable.
And a little compassion, right?
And a lot of compassion.
Part of it is that we don't want to make either the parent or the student or even the teacher feel like they are dropping behind. We're really just trying to equip the students with the skills in order to succeed.
Definitely. I mean, there's the teachers have a lot of pressure on them to do certain things, to teach a lot of material in a very short period of time. The parents very busy. The parents are, working, just have all their different activities that they're busy with. The kids are very busy by like say, third, fourth, fifth grade, they're super busy. So, it's not, so rather, so it's, the idea is not for anybody to feel badly about it, but how to make it work. So I can say that with our product, because of the design, because you just do small amounts, but very consistently over a long period of time, it's very doable. I've found that, small amounts over a long period of time work much better than cramming. And I think most people can relate to that, because I think most people have, had some experience with cramming at some point in their life. And usually they see that when you cram, you really don't remember. It's much harder to remember. You don't really know what you're learning, but you're just, memorizing it. And with the math facts, it's something that you really need to feel. The kids need to own it, because once they get into algebra and every problem involves maybe 10 to 20 different small problems within it, you can see that you really need to own those building blocks for math to work for you.
One of my favorite sports coaches when I was a kid growing up, I remember this phrase that he used to use, that practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent.
Yeah.
And I think that repeated practice that we're getting over and over again with Page a Day Math is in small bite-sized chunks, and really thinking about how to build success and automaticity when it comes to math facts is really just doing those short bite-sized chunks of practice over and over again, so that we get to that permanent state when we're in calculus and when we're in algebra decades later.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was just first figuring this whole thing out, what I saw, so I was teaching fifth grade, and there was such a huge difference between half the kids were really behind, half the kids were really ahead. I mean, there were years difference between the two groups. And what I noticed was the group that was really ahead they had really started their math facts in preschool. Really in preschool. I mean, before their parents had them, the parents had introduced them to math before they had hit kindergarten. So when they hit kindergarten, they were really up and running. They understood what math was. They were put into the higher math groups because they were so much further ahead than the kids that hadn't really seen math at all. And then and the kids that were in the lower groups were really just as capable, but they just hadn't had that exposure, where the other kids had already a year or two of exposure, and that's a lot of time for a small child. So then fast forward, those kids that were in the higher group stayed in the higher group. The kids that were in the lower group, kind of stayed in those lower groups, and those groups are about, at least a year or two apart from each other. So you can see how that can carry on through, 8th grade. Kids in the US by 8th grade, I think it's like 2/3 are way behind in math and don't know the basics. So like when you start is just so important. And you don't, and what I always try to tell parents too is that you just don't have to do a lot. If you think about 365 days in a year, if you do a minute a day, that's a lot of time that your child is getting in comparison to a child that's not getting that. So, if you think about 5 minutes a day, or 10 minutes a day, that's a tremendous amount of practice that other kids aren't getting. So by the time you add all that up, by the time a child's in 5th grade, that all that stuff is permanent, like you were saying. I mean, it's like they know it, it's part of them. And then they're enjoying math. I mean, and then they get a hard math problem and it's fun and it's a challenge, whereas the other kids are, sweating and suffering because they just don't even know how to go about solving it. They don't know really where to begin. So it's very stressful. So the kids that are, the kids that have that foundation are really less stressed. And, so often I heard people in when their kids were in kindergarten and first, I often heard some chatter about, the parents that were kind of on top of their kids, having them do extra things at home. It was kind of looked on in a slightly negative light. And really those kids, my experience was those kids were have much less stress by the time they were in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, because they knew how to do everything. They felt really good about themselves. They're really confident. So
and the key is getting that balance, which I think that you've done well with developing page-a-day math, is that you really can develop those skills in those bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
and slowly develop them over time without feeling stressed out. Whether they're looking at Mo and Flo and Zoe, all of the math squad dogs, they really just enjoy it. As opposed to making it feel like a slog of work that they're trying to get through.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has to be fun. I mean, we don't want to do things that we don't like. So, certainly kids are it's the same thing for the kids. And yeah, it's just thought out so that you just, I mean, the most important thing is that you can practice a little bit each day and that you just don't have to think about it. It can just happen really easily. And that also that parents don't have to figure out what they are going to have their kids do each day or what they're going to correct each day. Is just kind of there. Just there. The kids know what they're doing. The parent doesn't have to be there. Yeah.
Little research facts. When I was at the U.S. Department of Education, we worked with the top mathematicians across the United States, whether they were at Johns Hopkins, MIT, University of Michigan, the top scientists who were trying to learn how students acquire mathematics. And one of those key findings that they shared with the country in their math panel report was just that kids needed that fluency, that automaticity in the early years in order to be able to succeed in 5th, 6th, 7th, and onto their high school and college years. And so with that, 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, when in a fun way, when you are 3, 4, 5, 6 years old really pays off in terms of what you're able to do later on in life.
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes I feel like the word fluency isn't well understood. So I feel like, you know, people that are in education like kind of use that word a lot, and people that talk about math use the word fluency a lot. But I mean, I think you can compare it to almost, you know, when you're reading, sounding out words. You know, when you're first learning how to read, you sound each word out, and you're reading slowly, and you're not really understanding like the whole sentence. You're reading like a word at a time. So I would say, you know, not having math fluency would be the same thing. You're just like really having to break down like a problem, do it really slowly, and you might not really even understand what you're doing, but you're breaking it down to solve it. So you don't really understand where you're going to, but you're just, you're not really getting it. You might be doing it, but not really getting it. So yeah, so once you get that fluency, you own it, you get it.
Yeah, own it and own success later on.
Yeah. So
Thank you. Thank you,
sure.
Janice. Thanks for organizing this.
Sure. Yeah, this is great. This is great. Maybe we can do this again.
All right.
We'll do this again soon.
Look forward to it.
Anyway, thanks so much, Renee. Thanks for joining me.
Bye.
And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.